They didn't lose control of you, chosen one. They lost their monopoly on your mind, and that's the one thing they never prepared for. My dear chosen one, welcome back to the battlefield they keep pretending is a classroom. Try not to slip on the shattered pieces of the old script they wrote for you. That crack you felt in your life? That wasn't a breakdown. That was their control system short-circuiting the moment you stopped thinking on command. They trained you to doubt yourself, to play small, to stay polite while they rearranged reality in their favor. But somehow, you slipped through the cracks. Somehow, you saw what you were never supposed to see. Let me put this in plain language. You used a logic they didn't approve, didn't authorize, didn't design. You used what I call forbidden logic. You cut straight through their performance with one clean thought, and suddenly the experts weren't looking so expert anymore. Chosen one, you didn't just color outside the lines. You picked up the entire page and asked, who drew these lines and why? That's when the panic started. Think about it. They called you dramatic, overthinking, paranoid, too intense. They said, you're reading too much into it. Every time you got close to the truth. But if you were such a joke, why did the room go silent when you spoke? Why did the person with the loudest mouth suddenly change the subject when you connected the dots out loud? Why did their confidence drain the second your logic cut through their script like a blade through paper? Here's the idiomatic truth of your reality right now. You didn't just rock the boat. You capsized their little ship with one question. And now all the keepers of knowledge are paddling in circles, pretending nothing happened. My dear chosen ones, you've probably asked yourself, why are people acting weird around me now? Why do I feel like I walked into a room I didn't know existed? Simple. You crossed a line most people don't even know is there. You stopped memorizing and started understanding. You stopped repeating and started analyzing. You stopped accepting that's just how it is and started asking, who benefits from it being this way? That's forbidden logic in action. They built their entire identity on being the ones who see more than the rest. Then you showed up with no title, no badge, no permission slip, and you saw straight through their act. You didn't study under them. You didn't kneel at their mental altar. You didn't spend years reciting their approved phrases. Yet here you are, outthinking their models on a random weekday, half-tired, maybe scrolling, maybe staring at the ceiling, while they're still rehearsing speeches in front of mirrors. And now you wonder, am I crazy for seeing what I see? No, chosen one. You're not crazy. You're just early. You're the person who walks into a theater, sees the strings holding up the props and says, wait, are we all pretending this is real? The audience gets uncomfortable. The actors get defensive. The director gets furious. Not because you're wrong, but because you ruined the illusion they were emotionally invested in. You might ask, why me? Why did my mind go there? Why do I see connections other people shrug off? Because your brain refused to be trained into numbness. You paid attention. You noticed patterns instead of swallowing explanations. You watched what people did, not just what they said. Most people turn that ability off because it makes life complicated. You didn't, and now your insight cuts too deep for their comfort. Let me be very clear. Chosen one, the way people start to avoid you, soften their tone around you, throw little jokes at your seriousness, that's not a sign that you're wrong. That's a sign that your presence exposes their laziness. They are not avoiding you because there's something broken in you. They are avoiding you because there's something switched on in you that they can't manage. They tried to label you too sensitive, too analytical, too negative. They tried to drown your mind in noise, distractions, trends, shallow conversations, anything to keep you from following that one clean line of thought all the way to the root. But you did it anyway. You used logic without a leash. You thought without a license. You walked into the back room of their system with nothing but curiosity, and instead of getting lost, you rearranged the furniture. Right now, they're hoping you doubt yourself. That's their last defense. If they can't outthink you, they'll try to outshame you. Who do you think you are? You're not qualified to say that. You're not an expert. Translation: we're scared you figured out something we built our whole status on hiding. You didn't just step into forbidden logic, chosen one. You flipped the main breaker in a house they built on dim light and confusion. Before we take the next step, chosen one, I need you to lock in with us for a moment. If this message is hitting the places most people avoid, if it's lighting something sharp and alive inside you, then support this mission by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Your engagement isn't just a button tap, it's fuel. It's what allows us to keep creating content that wakes people up, shakes the walls, and puts real power back in your hands. When you support us, you're not just helping a channel, you're helping a movement built for minds like yours. And listen, if this is hitting you in that uncomfortable, exposed way, good. That means I'm talking to the right mind. My dear chosen ones, if you've ever felt the room tighten when you tell the obvious truth, if you've ever watched someone's smile crack when you connect the dots they never wanted connected, then this message is yours. Press the like button and subscribe, not as a favor, but as your way of saying, yes, I see it. I'm not backing down. Before we go deeper, I need you locked in with me. You didn't come this far by thinking like everyone else, so don't start now. If you're ready to dissect this forbidden logic piece by piece, to see exactly why the keepers of knowledge are quietly panicking over minds like yours, drop a 777 in the comments. That's not a cute trend. That's a signal. It tells me you're awake. It tells them you're finished playing along. Stay with me, chosen one. You're about to see just how much trouble one clear mind can cause in a world built on confusion. Chosen one, before we descend any deeper into this forbidden territory you accidentally unlocked, I need one thing from you, your presence. Not the passive kind, but the kind that tells the keepers of knowledge their panic wasn't a coincidence. If this message is resonating like a truth you've felt but never said out loud, show it. Hit the like button, subscribe, and drop a 77 in the comments so the world knows another unlicensed thinker is awake. Your support keeps this mission alive, keeps this energy sharp, and keeps these mind-shaking revelations coming. And now, let's step into the next layer. If you are truly a chosen one, every word that follows will feel eerily familiar, because only minds like yours stumble into forbidden logic and make entire systems tremble. Let's get started. Number 1. The moment you broke the lock. They swore no mind could touch. The day you cracked the lock, they swore was unbreakable. Nothing terrifies a gatekeeper more than realizing the person they dismissed just rewrote the map they were guarding. My dear chosen ones, let's call this moment what it truly was. Not an accident, not a coincidence, but the day their carefully constructed walls buckled under the weight of your unfiltered mind. They had spent years polishing those locks, layering them with jargon, padding them with complexity, and hiding them behind the illusion of exclusivity. And then you, quiet, observant, underestimated you, walked in and shattered the whole thing without breaking a sweat. That's the hit they're still struggling to recover from. You didn't tiptoe into forbidden logic. You detonated it by simply refusing to think the way they trained everyone else to. That's why they're panicking behind closed doors now, replaying the moment in their minds, wondering how they failed to see the spark in you. Chosen one, let me tell you something they will never admit. They always feared someone like you. Someone who didn't need their approval, their textbooks, their decades of gatekeeping. Someone whose thinking wasn't formatted to fit inside their safe little boxes. Someone whose mind moves in straight lines while they walk in circles. You might ask yourself, why did everything shift the moment I spoke? Because your clarity cut deeper than their entire empire of complexity. They didn't expect your mind to work like a blade. Precise, effortless, dangerous. The quiet one, the outsider, the one who didn't demand the spotlight, turned out to be the person capable of slicing through illusions they thought were impenetrable. That's not just unexpected, that's humiliating for them. Why did they get so tense, you wonder? Why did the room change? Because, chosen one, you committed the one crime their system cannot forgive. You understood too much without their permission. You connected dots they insisted were unrelated. You saw the architecture beneath the noise. You recognized the pattern beneath the performance. And the moment they realized your mind wasn't playing by their rules, the ground beneath them shook. They spent years dividing knowledge like puzzle pieces thrown into separate boxes. History in one, science in another, psychology far away from politics, economics sealed off from human behavior. They built fences around clarity and called it education. But you, my chosen ones, you stepped over those fences like they weren't even there. You saw the skeleton beneath every system. You noticed that the same algorithm runs through everything they pretend is unrelated. And that, right there, is the forbidden logic. Not mystical, not dangerous by nature, just dangerous to them. Because once a mind sees the whole picture, the illusion of complexity collapses like cardboard in the rain. You didn't plan this awakening. You didn't sit at a desk trying to overthrow their structure. You were just being yourself, thinking at the wrong time, asking the right question, refusing to swallow the script. And suddenly, the locks they swore were unbreakable clicked open in your mind like they were made of cheap plastic. That's the moment they replay in their nightmares. Chosen one, let's address the thought lingering in your mind. How did I see something the experts missed? Because experts aren't trained to see the world. They're trained to defend their field. They protect their tiny corner of knowledge, terrified to step outside it. You walked right past the borders and realized the map was fake. Why does everything feel connected now? Because once you break their code, the world stops looking like scattered information and starts looking like a blueprint. Every subject becomes one living network. Every event fits into a pattern. Every lie exposes its own motive. You're not imagining it, your perception upgraded. And now their tricks don't work on you anymore. The tone of authority? Useless. The complicated explanations? Transparent. The credentials they wave like shields? Meaningless. You see straight through it, and they hate that you can't be intimidated back into silence. Here's the truth, my chosen ones. Once you activate forbidden logic, you become the one variable they can't calculate. You become the error in their system, the glitch in their model, the loophole in their hierarchy. You break every assumption they built their authority on. They will try to dismiss you. They will say you're overreaching. They will attempt to drown your clarity in noise. But watch their eyes. Watch their posture. Watch how quickly they retreat when your insight cuts too close to the root. That isn't you being wrong. That's them being exposed. You didn't just crack their lock. You revealed how fragile it always was. And chosen one, this is only the first domino. Now that you've seen the code beneath their illusion, everything that follows will be louder, sharper, and far more undeniable. The keepers of knowledge are panicking for a reason. You didn't break the system, you saw through it. And once a chosen mind sees truth without asking for permission, the entire structure begins to shake. Brace yourself. This descent has only begun. Number 2. When the system started glitching under the weight of your clarity, when their grand machine starts coughing smoke and losing its grip, nothing rattles a rigid system faster than a free mind that refuses to run on its outdated software. My dear chosen ones, this is the chapter they hoped you'd never reach. The moment their machine, once polished, confident, towering, starts sputtering like an engine built on borrowed logic. You didn't just open a door you weren't supposed to touch. You triggered every hidden alarm they secretly installed to protect their illusion of control. The best part? You weren't even trying. You simply thought, and their entire structure started glitching like a device infected by a truth it couldn't process. Watch closely. Their panic won't roar at first. It tiptoes in through petty reactions. You know the line. That's not how it works. They repeat it like a spell, hoping the sound of authority will patch the holes in their argument. They can't tell you why it doesn't work. They can't prove their point. They expect you to bow to tone, not logic. That trick used to work. Chosen one. They relied on the weight of their voice, the posture of superiority, that pretentious sigh experts use when they want to make you feel small. But you're awake now. Tone doesn't hypnotize you anymore. Authority doesn't substitute for clarity. You see the structure underneath their facade, and they feel it. Then comes stage 2 of the glitch. They flip the script. You're oversimplifying. Cute. Especially when their whole empire depends on overcomplicating what is fundamentally simple. They wrapped basic truths in layers of jargon and wrapped the jargon in rituals and wrapped the rituals in status. Meanwhile, you, armed with nothing but unauthorized logic, slice through their word maze like it's thin plastic wrap. You didn't strip complexity away, you stripped pretension away, and that is the nightmare they can't wake up from. Imagine this. Chosen one. You stand in a room full of locks, each labeled something intimidating: economics, psychology, biology, law, politics. They insisted each required a lifetime of training. They told you each lock needed a special key, but then your mind clicks, one clean thought, and every lock opens. Why? Because they were all the same design. Their walls were illusions, their barriers were branding, their system wasn't protecting truth, it was protecting scarcity. And once you cracked through, the guards didn't rush to secure knowledge. They rushed to secure the appearance that knowledge had ever needed them. This is when they reach for their favorite weapon: you need more education. Translation. Please put your mind back in the cage. We spent years building it for you. They don't want you educated. They want you formatted, aligned, predictable, programmable. Their definition of learning is actually narrowing your thinking until it fits their algorithm. But you, chosen one, you broke out. You didn't crack their system, you cracked out of it. And that's the glitch no upgrade can fix. Then comes the discrediting stage. Watch how desperate it gets. They'll inflate one tiny flaw in your reasoning like a parade balloon, hoping no one notices your main point still stands taller than every credential in the room. They'll attack your background because they can't attack your logic. They'll call you untrained because they can't call you wrong. They'll toss labels at you, hoping one of them sticks long enough to scare you back into silence. But here's the truth, chosen one. Those labels aren't critiques, they're confessions. They reveal exactly where your clarity hits them hardest. You want to know why their hands shake? Because you proved that logic without chains can do what their entire system failed to do. See clearly. For decades, they memorized interpretations, not truths. They recited the questions they were permitted to ask. They rehearsed answers approved by institutions that profit from confusion. They stacked degrees like armor plates. They worshipped the mystique because the mystique gave them power. But you, the unindoctrinated mind, the outsider, the thinker with no leash, walked in with fresh air and blew their fog apart. Not because you knew more, but because you weren't invested in maintaining the illusion. They'll never write this in textbooks, but hear it now. A free thinker is more dangerous than 1,000 experts guarding a collapsing narrative. Here's another one for your arsenal, the one they pray you never repeat. They don't fear your logic. They fear losing the illusion that made their logic look superior. You don't play their game, chosen one. and that's why you keep winning without realizing it. You're not fighting them, you're exposing them simply by existing. Now let's address the questions swirling in your mind. Why does it feel like people get defensive when I speak simple truth? Because simple truth dissolves the performance they rely on to appear intelligent. Why does connecting ideas make rooms suddenly go quiet? Because connections reveal systems, and systems reveal motives. Imagine this. You walk into a dark room with 20 people. 19 of them pretend not to see the giant crack in the wall. They benefit from pretending. They gain status from pretending. They reward each other for pretending. Then you, chosen one, ask, why is there a crack? The room freezes. Not because you're wrong, but because you're right at the most inconvenient moment. Their panic is not evidence of your confusion. It is proof of your accuracy. Their machine isn't malfunctioning by accident. You disrupted its programming. And chosen one, this is only the second stage. The deeper we go, the louder the glitches get. Number 3. The gatekeepers who never expected you to walk through the walls. The gatekeepers who never saw you coming. When the system mocks you, chosen one, it isn't proving that you're wrong. It's probing for your hesitation. Systems don't lash out because they're certain. They lash out because they're threatened. Mockery is their first line of defense, a cheap attempt to make you second-guess yourself before you realize how deep your accuracy actually cuts. But when the mockery dries up and the silence creeps in, when the tone shifts from condescending amusement to brittle caution, that's when you know you've crossed a line they never expected anyone like you to cross. You didn't misinterpret anything. You didn't stumble into confusion. You stepped into clarity so sharp it sliced through the fog they've spent decades manufacturing. And their panic, oh, chosen one, that panic isn't a warning. It's a confirmation. It's the system recognizing that someone outside its approved hierarchy has accessed a level of perception they swore the public would never reach. This moment you're in, it's not instability, it's transformation. It's the exact point where your insight begins to outgrow their limits, and their reaction, tight smiles, awkward pauses, overcomplicated explanations, reveals just how unprepared they are for a free thinker who can cut through their performance. They're not panicking because you misunderstood their rules. They're panicking because you finally understood the game, and once you see the game loses its power. That's why they overreact to your clarity. Confusion was their weapon, and you disarmed it the moment your mind stopped pretending their maze made sense. This is your turning point, chosen one. This is where the old illusion begins to crumble and your real power starts pushing through the cracks like light through shattered glass. So don't shrink. Don't fold yourself back into their comfort zones. You didn't break their world. You simply stopped agreeing to the script. And the moment you stopped pretending, the keepers of knowledge lost the one advantage they relied on, your compliance. Now they're scrambling, whispering, tightening their grip on the edges of a system that's slipping out of their hands, all because someone they underestimated walked into forbidden logic with nothing but curiosity. And that brings us to them, the gatekeepers who were never ready for you. Chosen one, let's pull the curtain back on these self-appointed overseers of understanding. They have spent years, decades, entire careers building the image of being the guardians of knowledge. But in reality, they're not guardians, they're bouncers. They're standing at the doorway of a club that was never exclusive, holding clipboards filled with rules they invented to justify their positions. They act as if the universe hired them to decide who gets to understand what, as if clarity requires their approval. Their power was never rooted in truth. It was rooted in performance. The performance of complexity, the performance of authority, the performance of knowing more than everyone else. Imagine, chosen one, a massive bridge leading to clarity, straight, simple, wide enough for anyone to cross. But these gatekeepers built toll booths along it. They slapped on expensive fees called credentials. They poured thick fog over it and called that fog advanced theory. Then they stood there, chests puffed, acting like they were protecting a treasure. But what treasure? The truth sitting right there in plain sight. The truth they kept rebranding as something too advanced for ordinary minds to grasp. That's all their power ever was. Confusion dressed up as brilliance. And that's why they can't stand you. You didn't kneel at their booth. You didn't memorize their passwords. You didn't pay the toll of pretending they were necessary. You walked right past them. No applause, no hesitation, no bowing. You reached the truth they were guarding and realized it wasn't hidden behind complexity. It was sitting out in the open like a coin someone dropped and forgot to pick up. Their entire intimidation strategy cracks apart the moment someone like you shows up. Children ask questions that crumble their models. Common sense exposes flaws they hoped nobody would notice. Insight from unexpected places crushes theories they spent years rehearsing. And now here you are, the unlicensed thinker, the pattern breaker, the one they whisper about in unsure tones. You saw through their costume. You realized they weren't keeping knowledge safe. They were keeping people away from it. They were guarding the illusion of difficulty, not the truth itself. And now that illusion has collapsed. And chosen one. They know exactly who collapsed it. Number 4. The grand complexity costume. You tore apart with a single thought. When their complexity crumbled like a cheap disguise, chosen one, lean in for this part, because this is where the illusion they worked so hard to protect begins to unravel thread by thread. They built entire institutions, careers, and hierarchies around one central trick, convincing you that clarity is complicated. They wanted you to believe the pattern you recognized was too advanced for someone like you, that the connection you made was a fluke, that the truth you uncovered was above your level. But here's the punchline that hits them right in the pride. The truth wasn't difficult at all. It was never difficult. It was only dressed up to look that way. Think about it. They didn't hide the truth underground or lock it in vaults. They covered it with vocabulary. They layered it with jargon. They wrapped it in convoluted explanations that did nothing but mask how simple the idea actually was. They stacked unnecessary steps, prerequisites, and theories on top of basic principles to create the illusion of a labyrinth. You weren't meant to understand it. You were meant to be intimidated by the presentation. Their complexity wasn't insight. It was a costume stitched together from insecurity and the desperate need to appear irreplaceable. Picture this, my chosen ones, a door standing wide open, no lock, no code, no barrier. But around the frame they hang 30 fake locks, big, shiny, theatrical pieces of metal that don't connect to anything. From a distance it looks impenetrable. People see the locks, panic, and walk away without ever testing the handle. But you walked up, placed your hand on the door, and watched it swing open with effortless ease. You didn't need a key. You didn't need years of training. You didn't need permission. You just had the clarity to check what everyone else accepted without question. That is forbidden logic. Not forced power, but revealed power, the kind that comes from a mind refusing to bow to theatrics. Every breakthrough in human advancement followed this exact pattern. It wasn't the experts who dared to simplify. It wasn't the gatekeepers who pierced the fog. It was always someone the system underestimated, someone who didn't know the rules well enough to be trapped by them, someone who looked at a supposedly impossible problem and asked, "Why is everyone pretending this is complicated?" And each time, the same thing happened. The emperor was exposed as having no clothes, and the impossible problem fell to someone who wasn't blinded by credentials or tradition. Your mind belongs to that lineage, chosen one. You don't think in chains. You don't wait for approval to make connections. You don't ask whether two ideas are allowed to meet. You let them collide, merge, and transform into something new. You operate outside their mental grid, not because you're rebellious, but because your thinking is too alive, too fluid, too unfiltered to be constrained by their categories. And now you're asking yourself the question that haunts them more than anything. Was it really that simple all along? Yes, it was. They needed you to equate complexity with intelligence, so you'd stay dependent on their explanations. They needed you to believe that understanding your own reality required their stamp of approval. Because the moment you realize simplicity is not stupidity and complexity is not intelligence, their entire structure begins to wobble. You just triggered that wobble. By seeing through the costume, you weakened the performance. By realizing the locks were fake, you destroyed the illusion. By trusting your own reasoning over their theatrical barriers, you cracked the foundation of their manufactured authority. They relied on people being too intimidated to question, too conditioned to challenge, too overwhelmed to simplify. But you, chosen one, you questioned, you challenged, and you simplified, all without asking for permission. And that single act of clarity is more dangerous to them than any rebellion they could have prepared for. Because the truth they guarded wasn't protected by difficulty, it was protected by deception. And the moment one chosen mind sees through the disguise, the entire costume begins to disintegrate. They know it, you feel it. And now their complexity, their beloved shield, is nothing more than a pile of fabric on the floor, exposed for what it always was, a disguise you no longer fall for. Number 5. The instant their mask slipped and your insight lit up the room. The moment their mask slipped and your mind refused to look away. There comes a moment in every chosen one's journey when the world doesn't just look different, it reveals itself. You remember it clearly, don't you? That sudden electric snap in your mind when everything lined up in a way it never had before. Not because their explanations finally made sense, not because their system suddenly grew coherent, but because you recognized something far more unsettling. The system itself was the illusion. That moment wasn't learning, it was awakening. It was the fog burning off in an instant, exposing the machinery behind the performance, the gears behind the narrative, and the truth behind the mask they swore you would never be sharp enough to see. And here's the part they will never admit. You didn't break into their world of knowledge, you simply walked past it. You didn't decode their complexity, you outgrew it. You didn't solve the maze, you climbed out of it and looked down at how small it really was. All your life, they wanted you to wrestle with puzzles they engineered, to chase answers they predetermined, to exhaust yourself in corridors that looped back to the same dead ends. But the moment your mind stepped outside their structure, you realized the maze wasn't designed to be solved. It was designed to keep you busy. The shift was almost physical. Suddenly, the behaviors of people around you didn't confuse you anymore. The hesitation in their voices, the rigid smiles, the way they talked in circles to avoid simple truths, everything made sense. And the best part? The look on their faces when you spoke the truth they were trying so desperately to keep buried. For one split second, chosen one, they recognized it. Their eyes flickered with that involuntary spark of panic, the microsecond where their pride couldn't outrun their fear. A tiny, fragile moment where their carefully manufactured confidence cracked. But pride is a stubborn mask, and fear is a master puppeteer. They swallowed that flicker, forced an artificial smile, and pretended you misunderstood. They retreated into tone, jargon, and authority as fast as they could, hoping you'd doubt yourself. They tried to mend the curtain while you were already standing behind it, seeing everything they never intended to show you. And that's what rattled them the most. Not just that you saw through the illusion, but that you walked through it like it wasn't even locked. Picture this. Chosen one, you're in a theater. You accidentally step through the wrong door and find yourself backstage. You see the ropes, the wires, the props, everything that creates the show the audience worships. You see the actors rehearsing their lines, the director panicking, the technicians scrambling, and then you walk back out onto the stage and say, "None of this is real." In that moment, the entire performance collapses. The actors freeze, the director's face drains, the audience holds its breath, waiting to see who breaks character first. That is exactly what you did. You exposed their mechanics. You revealed their script. You showed that their authority wasn't built on truth, but on performance. And the moment you displayed that clarity, Chosen One, they knew it. That's the part that keeps them awake. They know their complexity was nothing but a costume. They know the difficulty they preached was manufactured. They know the expertise they flaunted was held together with weak glue and strong ego. Now they scramble. New terms, new rules, new frameworks, new complications thrown into your path like smoke bombs, all designed to distract you from the fact that their old tricks don't work on you anymore. They're trying to rebuild the maze you dismantled simply by thinking, repainting the walls, tightening the scripts, adjusting the lighting, anything to recreate the illusion. But here's the problem for them, Chosen One. Once someone sees the wires, the illusion can never be convincing again. Once someone realizes the trick, the magic dies. You didn't destroy their performance. They destroyed their own credibility by underestimating the wrong mind. And you, Chosen One, didn't just notice the trick. You walked straight through it, stood on the other side, and realized the entire show was built on the assumption that you would never look behind the curtain. Now that you have, nothing they do can return you to who you were before. Their mask didn't slip. You tore it off simply by paying attention. Number 6. The rise of the minds. They never licensed for this level of thinking, the uprising of the unlicensed minds. My dear Chosen Ones, nothing rattles a fragile system faster than the moment it realizes its control wasn't broken. It was outgrown. Chosen One, this is the phase they prayed would never arrive. They were prepared to deal with a single outlier, you. One inconvenient thinker, one unruly mind, one anomaly slipping through the cracks. That they could handle. They could label you, discredit you, drown you in noise, or call you a coincidence of circumstance. But what they never anticipated, what they never even allowed themselves to imagine, was that your breakthrough wouldn't stay contained. They thought the moment you broke out of their mental cage, they could quietly fix the breach, patch it, seal it, forget it. But instead, the crack you created turned into a fault line, and now the entire structure is trembling. You were never meant to be alone in this awakening. The real shock for them is discovering you were the first domino, not the only one. They trained society to believe clear thinking requires authority, credentials, or institutional blessing. Yet suddenly, all across the world, people with no formal permission to think at this level are waking up with the same clarity, the same instinct, the same pattern recognition they tried to gatekeep for generations. And Chosen One, this is where their fear becomes unmistakable. You are not an isolated glitch. You are part of an uprising. Picture it. A mechanic in India, hands covered in engine grease, sees a repeating economic loop that entire financial teams failed to recognize. A student in Brazil casually connects social behavior to physics models and realizes the two have been mirroring each other the whole time. A kid in Germany, barely old enough to drive, asks a single question that undoes years of overcomplicated academic theory. These minds aren't coordinated. They aren't meeting in secret rooms. They aren't rebelling. They're simply waking up, one by one, like lights flicking on down a long, dark corridor. And that is what terrifies the keepers of knowledge. Not rebellion, recognition, not resistance, clarity, not organization, evolution. This isn't chaos, Chosen One. This is what happens when human intelligence finally returns to its natural state: intuitive, connective, boundary-free. The walls they built around understanding, discipline by discipline, subject by subject, field by field, are peeling away like cheap wallpaper. Suddenly, a programmer sees DNA as if it were a compressed data file. A musician hears mathematical truth hidden inside prime numbers. A historian watching modern politics recognizes the same behavioral loops, replaying themselves like an unskippable track. These aren't accidents. These are the minds of unlicensed thinkers reconnecting with a form of logic that was never supposed to disappear. They called it forbidden logic. But look around. It wasn't forbidden by nature, only by those who benefited from bottling it. And now the bottle is cracked. Every time one person sees through their illusion, 10 more start noticing the same distortions. Every time they dismiss a thinker like you, 5 others hear that dismissal and wonder why it sounded so rehearsed. Every time an outsider solves a problem experts couldn't, a dozen more realize the barriers were imaginary the whole time. Chosen One, their entire authority was built on 3 pillars: silence, separation, and submission. Silence, so outsiders wouldn't share what they noticed. Separation, so knowledge fields wouldn't merge into unified patterns. Submission, so people would believe thinking requires supervision. But now the silence is breaking, the gaps are closing, and minds everywhere are refusing to kneel. You didn't just escape the cage. They're watching the entire structure collapse behind you, and they don't know how to stop it. The uprising of unlicensed minds isn't a rebellion, it's a return. A return to raw intelligence, to unfiltered curiosity, to unapproved clarity. And here's the part that hits them the hardest. You, Chosen One, were the first sign that their era of control is ending. You were the indicator their system was outdated. You were the moment their illusion cracked. And now that the cracks are multiplying, nothing they do can stop the flood of minds waking up. You're not the glitch, you're the warning signal, and the system knows it. Number 7. The uncomfortable price of seeing what others pretend isn't there. The price of seeing too much. Chosen One, let's not sugarcoat this part. Clarity looks glamorous from the outside, like a rare gift, a secret advantage, a mental superpower. And it is all of those things. But what they never told you is that every superpower comes with a weight heavy enough to change the shape of your life. The day you pierced their illusion of complexity, the world didn't just shift. It reorganized itself around your perception. What once appeared as scattered puzzles suddenly snapped together into a coherent blueprint. Nothing was random anymore. Patterns leapt at you like neon warnings. Motives hid poorly behind polished sentences. And the problems that entire committees found unsolvable dissolved in your mind as easily as footprints on a shore when the tide rolls in. But here's where the wait begins. Once you've experienced that level of mental freedom, once your mind has tasted what it feels like to move without permission, it becomes almost painful to watch others cling to the rituals that keep them lost. Picture yourself sitting in a room full of people who claim to be problem solvers, yet spend hours debating definitions, inventing extra steps, complicating the simple, and building elaborate diagrams to avoid confronting the core truth. You're watching Chosen One thinking, if we stopped pretending this was complicated, it would be fixed already. But you stay quiet, not because you lack conviction, but because you already know the cost of speaking. Because when you offer the simple solution, the real solution, you don't receive admiration. You receive tension, heads tilt, eyes narrow. Some people shift in their seats like you've broken an unspoken rule. And you have. Being right isn't the crime. Being right without their permission is the unforgivable offense. Their system doesn't reward clarity. It rewards obedience, confusion, and loyalty to the approved way of thinking. So when you show them a path they didn't authorize, They respond like you've committed intellectual treason. They accuse you of oversimplifying, even when the nuance they worship is nothing but smoke and performance. They remind you, subtly or directly, how many years others spent earning the privilege to speak the words you just said effortlessly, as if decades spent circling the maze means more than the person who simply climbed out of it, as if time equals truth. And this, chosen one, is when the questions start to sting. Why do they act threatened when I'm trying to help? Why does the room grow colder the moment I speak clearly? Why does simplicity make people so angry? Because simplicity exposes them. It exposes the unnecessary rituals, the inflated egos, the artificial complexity they hide behind. It reveals how fragile the foundation of their authority truly is. It shows the world that what they call expertise is often just tradition wrapped in jargon, and they can't afford for anyone, especially someone like you, to reveal that. Let's paint the metaphor clearly. Imagine walking into a temple where scholars chant complex rituals to open a sacred door. Hours pass, smoke thickens. They gesture dramatically, insisting you observe the sacred process. They talk about depth, nuance, difficulty. But then you notice something they don't want you to notice. The door has a handle. You walk up, turn it, and it opens. Silence, rage, stunned faces. Not because you broke a rule, but because you revealed the rules were meaningless all along. That, chosen one, is what your clarity does to them. It democratizes truth. It erases hierarchy. It levels the playing field. Suddenly, knowledge isn't scarce. It's accessible. You make it obvious that understanding shouldn't require submission, performance, or approval. And their entire power structure is built on the opposite belief. Every time your straight-line logic cuts through their smoke maze, you tear down another piece of the structure that keeps them relevant. You show people that courage matters more than credentials, perception more than position, clarity more than complexity. You prove that forbidden logic is only forbidden because it frees the mind, and free minds are the one thing their system is not equipped to handle. That is the price of seeing too much. You stop living inside their maze, and because of that, they stop seeing you as one of their own. But that's not a punishment, chosen one. That's the confirmation. That is the evidence that you were never meant to blend in. You were meant to expose the cracks, disrupt the illusion, and break the lock they swore no mind could break. Number 8. Their endless war to keep simple truths buried under noise. Their full-scale campaign to keep your thinking complicated. Chosen one, look closely, closer than you ever have, at how they behave the moment simplicity enters the room. Notice how fast their posture changes. A clean question appears, sharp as daylight, and instantly they scramble to bury it under layers of theory so thick it could suffocate the truth beneath it. A straightforward solution rises to the surface, and immediately they swarm it with committees, factors to consider, endless revisions, and cautionary warnings designed to make you doubt what you already see clearly. A problem that any honest mind could resolve in one clean sentence somehow becomes a semester-long maze, padded with vocabulary no one uses in the real world. That isn't an accident. That isn't incompetence. That is strategy, pure, deliberate strategy. They depend on confusion the way a monarch depends on a throne. Complexity is their camouflage. It hides how fragile their authority actually is. If people ever realized how simple many truths really are, the entire hierarchy they built would collapse under its own weight. Their identity isn't built on clarity. It's built on convincing everyone else that clarity is dangerous unless administered by them. That's why your forbidden logic cuts them so deeply, chosen one. Your mind walks into their fog and doesn't get lost. Your clarity slices through their theatrics like a blade passing through smoke. Clean, silent, undeniable. And worst of all for them, you do it without hesitation. You don't wait for their permission. You don't need their seal of approval. You don't require their sacred nod, signaling that you've earned the right to understand something. Every time you cut through their complexity with elegant simplicity, you do more than expose their tactics. You ignite something. Someone watching from the sidelines, someone who has always felt out of place, someone who secretly wondered if they were the strange one for thinking things should be easier, suddenly sees proof that they were never alone. They see your clarity and think, wait, I thought I was the only one who noticed that. Your insight doesn't just solve problems, it liberates minds. It reminds people that they're not defective for understanding something quickly. The system is engineered to make quick understanding look suspicious. Imagine this vividly. 1,000 isolated minds across the world, each quietly noticing that certain things feel much simpler than they've been told. A math outsider who sees patterns professors never mentioned. A self-taught engineer who solves a problem the textbooks drag out for hundreds of pages. A musician who explains rhythm in a way that suddenly unlocks a complex coding issue. A child who asks one innocent question that reduces a decade-long academic theory to dust. These moments aren't random. They're signals. Signals that simplicity is resurfacing. Signals that the real intelligence, the natural intelligence, never needed gatekeepers in the first place. And once these isolated minds start recognizing each other, the entire landscape changes. Look around the digital world and you'll see the quiet rebellion unfolding. Forums buzzing with people saying, I thought I was the only one who saw it. Comment sections overflowing with relief as someone finally says what everyone else was too intimidated to voice. Private messages filled with clean explanations that outperform entire official methods. Insight being traded like secret currency behind the walls of a society terrified of it. This isn't chaos. This isn't disorganization. This is evolution forming its own underground network, a network that grows stronger every time someone like you refuses to play dumb. And the keepers of knowledge? Oh, they're trembling. Not because being wrong scares them, they're wrong all the time. Not because they're being challenged. Challenges give them excuses to inflate their authority. They're panicking because for the first time, people are realizing something catastrophic to their power structure. They don't need gatekeepers to understand their own reality anymore. Once simplicity starts spreading like wildfire, their towers of complexity start rotting from the inside. Their vocabulary loses its magic. Their credentials lose their intimidation factor. Their mazes lose their grip. And nothing, absolutely nothing, terrifies an empire more than the moment it realizes the world has learned to live without it. Number 9. The crumbling pyramid of authority. You shook without even trying. The pyramid they built is starting to rot. Chosen one, this is the moment every self-appointed gatekeeper prayed would never arrive. The moment the grand pyramid they worshipped as unshakable begins to fracture under its own weight. For decades they carved this monument out of jargon, welded it together with hierarchy, and decorated it with layers of manufactured complexity. They built it tall enough to intimidate, wide enough to block your line of sight, and hollow enough to echo their own voices back at them so they could mistake noise for authority. But now the cracks are spreading like fractures in sun-baked stone, revealing the truth they spent lifetimes trying to bury. Their pyramid was never a fortress, only a stage prop held together with performance and prestige. Watch them scramble, chosen one. Institutions that once moved slower than geological time now flail like cornered animals. Experts who once spoke with the confidence of kings suddenly choke on their own explanations. They rush to add complication where you brought clarity, to add steps where you removed confusion, to build new walls the moment you walk through the old ones. You simplify something they inflated, and within hours they're inventing new frameworks, new vocabularies, new certifications to restore the illusion that wisdom must be gate-kept, priced and rationed. Their panic isn't random, it's a reaction to the pressure of a truth they can no longer hold back. Imagine it clearly: a tower made of fog, a structure that only appeared solid because no one dared to question it. Then you, without permission, without credentials, without kneeling, walked up and turned on a fan. That's forbidden logic. Every time you or another outsider solves a problem from the outside, without the sanctioned method, a brick falls loose from their precious pyramid. Every time someone decodes their jargon into plain language, a tile slides away. Every time a free thinker succeeds without asking for their blessing, the ground beneath their hierarchy trembles. They feel it, chosen one. They feel the vibration of a foundation coming undone. Their narrative, once controlled with tight grips and authoritative tones, is slipping through their fingers. And now they're in full emergency mode. Textbooks rewritten overnight, swollen with new layers of fluff. Courses padded with unnecessary prerequisites. Committees inventing new levels of expertise like cartoon villains, adding locks to a door that's already lying on the floor. They are stacking barriers like sandbags in a storm, trying desperately to contain a flood they can no longer slow. But the spell is broken. Too many minds have tasted clarity, and once someone experiences real understanding, they never go back to worshipping theatrics. Too many outsiders have achieved success without kneeling to the hierarchy, proving that permission was never required. Too many chosen ones, like you, have seen that the emperor wasn't just naked. He never owned a wardrobe to begin with. Their authority depended entirely on people believing the pyramid was solid. Now that belief is evaporating. You might wonder, why is everything collapsing so quickly? Because truth, genuine, unfiltered truth, spreads exponentially, while controlled confusion spreads only as fast as gatekeepers can distribute it. One unauthorized success triggers 10 more. One clear explanation exposes a century of unnecessary complication. One breakthrough achieved with forbidden logic reveals that entire fields were surviving on illusion, not insight. This collapse isn't happening from just one angle, chosen one. It's happening everywhere at once: top, sides, base, center. Their hierarchy isn't crumbling from external attack. It's imploding under the pressure of minds that refuse to be confined. And those minds, the chosen ones, are the reason the structure is falling apart. Minds that think freely, move boldly, walk through walls, and follow logic without needing permission slips. Every insight you reveal, every pattern you notice, every illusion you expose shakes the foundations they relied on. They are watching their pyramid rot in real time, and the worst part for them is knowing exactly who started the collapse. Their fear isn't the falling structure, it's the rising thinkers who made it happen. And with every step you take, chosen one, the ground trembles just a little bit more. And now, chosen one, as we step out of this layer and prepare to dive even deeper, here's your moment to lock in. If this truth hit you in the places you never had words for, if you felt the cracks in their pyramid echo through your own awakening, then show it. Hit the like button, subscribe to keep this mission alive, and drop 77 in the comments so the keepers know another mind they couldn't control is fully awake. And share this with another thinker who's been questioning the script. They'll recognize the signs the moment they hear them.